Hey guys, so this is just going to be a quick tutorial slash crash course on Rhino. I'm going to focus mostly on UI and using Rhino and best practices, and then I'll go over a little bit some of the commands, but I'm not going to go over all of them just because there's like way too many to go over in a short video. So first of all, obviously Rhino is 3D, not 2D like AutoCAD, so there are more views or at least more views that you're going to be using. In AutoCAD, there are actually the same amount of views, but you don't really use them. So the main difference is this perspective view here. This is your 3D view. There are also 2D views here as well. You'll see this was top, front, right. You can change the mode of all of these views as far as what they display by going to the arrow down here. And you'll see a lot of different, basically, viewing options. So here, if I do shaded, you'll see it goes to shaded, rendered. This will apply any textures or materials that you have. Ghosted is sometimes helpful for seeing through things. And then there's also wireframe, which is what we were on. Uh, so you're going to spend most of your time in shaded. At least that's what I recommend. This is just the easiest. It allows you to select things easiest. It allows you to see how your model is coming along and to show shadows and stuff. Yeah, you're just going to spend most of your time here. Also, it doesn't lag out your computer. Um, so if you have it in rendered all the time, it's gonna be more stress on your computer. So also you don't want to actually ever render in rendered because the rendering is really just not good. You're gonna want to use an actual rendering program like Enscape or Lumion or something. This is kind of just if you want a quick look. So yeah, I spend like 95% of my time in shaded, and then like the other 5% is kind of spread between wireframe and ghosted. If sometimes you just need it helps with modeling some aspect of it, or I'll take a quick look in render to see what's going on. You can also set these 2D views to that as well. So I can show rendered in 2D as well. You can also do more than just these front, right, and top. There are other ones as well. So if you go down here, there's obviously a lot of options. You can go to set view, and then you can change. There's also back and left. So yeah, there's also bottom. So you can change any of those. There's also isometric views if you want to do something like that. So if you want to do like an exploded axon, you can set it here. There's a lot of other things here as well, but I'm also going to talk about named views first. So named views, I actually have it as a tab up here that I have pinned. And if you don't have any of these tabs or you have tabs up here that I don't have, you can add or remove tabs by right-clicking on this bar. And then a list will come up and you can just click check or uncheck them. So named views, you can create a view that's set. So if I'm like, oh, I really like this view and I want to render this, I can save this. And then if I can go model, do whatever, and I can come back here by double clicking on it. So this is really helpful for rendering because if you're using Enscape, you can set it in here and then it will transfer over to Enscape. And why it's helpful is because you can render it, take it into Photoshop, do whatever you need to do in Photoshop. And then if you're using Photoshop layers correctly, which hopefully you should be, and doing all your edits on Photoshop layers, then if you're like, oh, you know what, I need to change the model or I want to redo this rendering and add more detail to the model or something, you can go back and re-render it from that same view and then just drag and drop it into the Photoshop file, put it underneath all those layers, and you're done. You don't need to redo all those edits because all those edits are separate from the actual photo. And if you have the same view saved, everything will line up perfectly. So that's really helpful. Highly recommend using it. Over here are obviously more tabs. The first one is the layers tab. This is the one you're going to be using the most, or at least hopefully you'll be using the most. Layers are super important in Rhino. They're important in AutoCAD as well, but especially important in Rhino because we're working in 3D, so there's just that many more things you have to deal with. Yeah, you can double click, or you can slow click to name them. There's obviously light bulb, or you can hide or show the layer. You can lock the layer. The material is what color, or sorry, not the material. This color swatch cube thing is what it shows up as in a non-rendered view. So if I'm here, if I change this to a different layer by right-clicking on the layer, and then you could do change object layer, you'll see it's blue now to match the color of the layer. This is not how it renders. These colors here are not how it renders. It's just for visibility in Rhino when you're modeling. Another reason I use shaded because this color system helps you kind of differentiate between things. The material, this material is what it will actually render as. If you click on this, there are options here for different kind of basic default ones in Rhino. You can also go to more types and go to import, and you'll get this whole library of stuff which you can go to and just pick one and get all this. There's other options here to change some things if you want to. I don't recommend messing around with these too much, at least like the preset ones, just because they're generally fine. And messing around with them might mess up your render. Also, if you want to use an existing material, you can just take this drop down, and then this, all of the materials that you have in the project will be here, so you can apply the same material to more than one thing. You can also, there's also Enscape materials and stuff, but that's a different topic. All this stuff over here you're never really going to use. That's for like plotting and stuff, but you never plot from Rhino. Just don't plot from Rhino. You might have seen before, but there are other options here. If you right click on the layer, you can select all the objects on a layer. So if I go to this layer and I select all objects, it'll select the cube. So this is really helpful for organizational things. Like I said, if you're using layers a lot, which you should be, then it can be really helpful and easy to just select all the objects on a layer and do something to them if you're using layers in an effective way, rather than having to go through your project and just like individually select all of the things. You can also duplicate a layer. You can duplicate the layer with all the objects on it. And yeah, I think that's good for layers. Oh, there's also sublayers. So if this sublayer here, you can create a new sublayer. You can create sublayers within sublayers. So the reason this is helpful is if you turn off the parent layer, the sublayer, every sublayer will also hide itself. So that's not what I want. So if I turn off layer 3, if I like hide layer 3, all the lower layers will also hide. But if you just want to hide a sublayer, you can, and none of the other sublayers or parent layer will hide. Or lock, same thing. So it's just a really helpful organizational thing. Like if you're modeling a bunch of windows, you can have all the, you can have the parent layer as just window, and then you can have frame here, you could have glass, you could have mullions, and then if you want to select all the windows, you can select all the windows by, right clicking on, you can select multiple layers actually. You can select multiple layers, right click, select all objects, or you can hide all the windows, or you can just hide all the frames, but not hide the glass and mullions, that type of thing. Also, materials get applied based on layer. So if you want to have a bunch of different materials applied to things, you need to have those things on different layers. So I just highly recommend using layers, use more layers rather than less layers, because you can always downsize. You can always, select all the objects on a layer and move it to another layer really easily. It's a pain in the butt to try and take a complex model and separate it into separate layers when you only have it all on one layer, because you have a ton of elements and you got to go through and click on each of them and create new layers. It's a pain. So use more layers rather than less. And if you end up having like too many layers, and you're like, you know what, actually, it'd be better if I consolidate some of these. You can do that really, really quickly. So yeah, please use layers. They're just really helpful. So there are also there are two ways to enter commands in Rhino. The first one is all these icons up here and up above. And actually, if you click on these, I believe this is all just the same as the icons. So I guess maybe there's three ways. So there's these icons here, there's the menus up here, and then there's also the command bar. You should never really be entering commands from the icons by clicking on the icons, or from this menu options up here. You just shouldn't, because it's just super inefficient. You want to be entering commands with the command bar. There are two ways to enter commands in the command bar. The first one is to type it out. Like if I want to use the move command, or let's do extrude curve command. So if I want to use the extrude curve command, I can type out this, and when you see the blue highlighted, that will auto-complete it for you. So I don't actually have to finish typing out the last few letters. I can just hit enter. It's important in case you're typing out a longer command and it auto-completes it. You don't need to type out the whole thing. Saves yourself some time. So I can, sorry, space is actually enter in Rhino. So when I say enter, I mean space. So I hit space, and then I'm going to select my circle to extrude, um, and I can, I can extrude it. The other way to do it is through aliases. Or this is a fine way to do it, and this is way better than trying to find the command up here or up here. It's just super inefficient to do that. You'll spend way more time modeling than you actually need to. So you want to try and learn the commands and then actually type them into the command bar. You can just start typing at any point. You don't actually have to click in the command bar either. You don't have to go up here and do this. Just Rhino automatically knows that if you're typing at all, you are typing in the command bar. So the first way is to type it out, and that is the second best way. And if you're not gonna use the other way, which I'm gonna show you, then you need to use that way and not go look for commands here. If you are trying to find a command that you don't know exists, or you're not sure what that command actually is, yeah, sure, go ahead and look in these. Like if you're trying to do something with surfaces and you're like, none of the commands that I know do this, and I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, go up here and try and browse around to see what you have. Sure, that I do that all the time if I don't know what command I'm looking for. Same thing if you want to go up here, like if you want to go into surface here and try and look for something. But if you know the command, you should type it in, and you want to try and learn as many commands as you can, and so that you can just type it in and not have to go find it. So the second best way to do this is if you go to Tools and then Options, there is this thing called aliases. Basically what this is that you can assign any combination of letters to a command. So I can just type in BU and then hit space / which is enter in Rhino. I can type in BU and space, and it will activate, or it will essentially run the Boolean union command without me actually having to type out Boolean union. So the reason these are really great is because ideally you want your right hand on the mouse and your left hand on the keyboard at all times, and you want to move your right hand away from the mouse as little as possible. So you want both hands doing an equal amount of work so that you can be as fast as possible. So what these aliases, what I have tried to set up is a arrangement where they're all pretty easily within range of my left hand being on the left side of the keyboard, and they're all fairly simple combinations, like double tapping, AA or EE or something as much as possible, so that I can just really quickly get a command and use it. I don't have to type out a long command. I don't have to move my right hand away from the mouse. I don't have to go looking for one in the search in the icons or whatever. This is by far the best way to do it. I'm not really sure there's a better way to do it. Actually, I'm pretty sure there isn't a better way to do it, but this is really, really good. Just to give an example, right? If you are, let's say, modeling at least an hour every day in Rhino for Studio, right? Which that's probably a conservative estimate, but let's say you're modeling an hour, on average, an hour every day. If that is the case, in that hour, or in that hour, in every minute in the hour, you're probably going to enter about 3 commands a minute. Again, conservative estimate. So 3 commands a minute for an hour, that's 180 commands in an hour. If it takes you 2.5 seconds to type in a command or go find a command, that means you're going to be spending 180 times 2.5 is, let's see, 2.5 seconds times 180 commands in an hour. You're going to be spending 7.5 minutes every hour entering commands. That's a long time. If, on the other hand, you have aliases, right, and let's say it takes you an average of a second per command because of the aliases, then you're only spending 180 seconds, which is 3 minutes every hour. So it saves you 4.5 minutes every hour. Across a week, that's 4.5 times 7, 31. So it's half an hour every week that you are literally buying yourself by using aliases. And then obviously, scale it up to a semester, and you're saving yourself like 8 hours across the semester, which, again, that's a super conservative estimate. It's probably more like 12 hours a semester. So you're saving yourself literally like a full day's worth of work, which you can spend on other things like sleep or going out with your friends, or, putting even more time into school so that you can make an even better project, right? So it's famously hard to get time, and there's famously not a lot of time as an architecture student, but this is one way where you can literally buy yourself time. So please, please, please use aliases. They will help you so much. And obviously, these are just the ones I have. You can customize them as much as you want. And if you're ever doing a project, a different unique project, and there's one or two commands that you don't usually use all the time, but for this project, you're just using them a lot. Make a new alias. Just create a new alias for that command and go with it and save yourself time. Don't be afraid to create unique aliases just based on one project and then never use that alias again. It's okay. So that's aliases. Next thing is the mouse control. It's pretty simple. It's right click. So right click in any 2D view is a pan. You can zoom in or out with scroll wheel. Right click in 3D view is actually orbit. And then in order to pan in a 3D view, it's a shift right click. I don't know why it's not consistent. It's weird that they flip it, but yeah. So right click is orbit, shift right click is pan. Again, zooming is just the scroll wheel. If you want to select things, you can obviously just click on them. Holding shift will add things to the selection. Holding control will remove things from the selection. So I have two things selected. I control click on this, it removes it. There's also the selection window. So if you click on the left or you click and you move your mouse right, I'm not sure what the exact term for this is, but basically the window will select only things that are entirely in the window. So if I click and move to the right, and you'll see the box is all in the window, so it'll select it. But if I click move to the right and the box isn't all in the window, it doesn't get selected. On the other hand, if you click and move to the left, it will select anything that the box touches. So you'll see here the blue cube, the blue cube is not within the bounding box, but it still gets selected because it's touched by the bounding box. So if I even just touch it a little bit, it will get selected. Next thing would be snaps. Snaps are pretty much the same as in AutoCAD. I will say, you've probably heard this a million times, but always, 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 always snap. The number one rule in modeling anything, computer modeling anything, is you snap. Just period. There are no exceptions. Snap to everything. If it's not snapping, figure out why it's not snapping and fix it, because likely whatever issue that is just going to compound itself, and later on your model is going to get really messed up and you're going to have to spend way too much time trying to fix it, or it's just, not going to be usable. So always use snaps. Snaps in Rhino are on the bottom left here. The ones I have on, I just have most of them on. I'm not really sure what quad or not or vertex do. The center one is the only one I will talk about. The center one, basically, the difference between center and mid is that mid will snap to the middle of a line. So if I have mid on and I am trying to snap here, you'll see it snaps to the middle. Center snaps to the center of an area or curve. So if I have center on, it will snap to the center of the circle. And you don't actually have to move to the center to do this. I know some people, they'll like move. So the best way to get it to show is you start a little bit towards the center and then move outwards. And then as soon as that like icon or whatever shows up there, you can just click. So I can just click here and it'll snap to the center. You don't actually have to move back to the center of the circle. Like you don't have to do this and then move back and click. And yeah, I have center off most of it by default because Rhino just has a tendency to want to snap to the center when you don't want it to. And it just like will always default snapping to the center if you have that on and it's an option. So I just find it really annoying and I just turn it on when I actually need it and want to snap to the center. Oh, also ortho mode. I'll talk about ortho mode for a second. I just have ortho mode off by default. You can toggle between having it on or off by holding down shift. So if I have a line here, I can move it in any direction, right? Ortho mode is off by default. If I hold down shift, it will toggle on ortho mode and it will only go in 90-degree angles. So O snap is snapping too, by the way. So if your O snap is not on, you will not snap. O snap stands for object snap, and that's what all this is. So you want to have your O snap on all the time. I'm not totally sure what Smart Track is, but I think it's on by default, and I just always leave it on. So the other thing I'll talk about is the gumball. So the gumball is a really unique thing to Rhino, and it's this thing here, this arrows and whatnot that shows up. It allows you to do a lot of things pretty simply and quickly. So first of all, obviously, there is the arrow. Oh, this is an unfortunate color of blue. Okay, here we go. So these arrows allow you to move the object. So if I click it, I can drag it. You can also click once on the arrow and it will bring up this box and you can move it an exact amount, 5 feet. So if you enter any of the commands on the gumball, or if you do anything with the gumball while holding Alt, it will copy it. So in that case, I moved something. There's also these things over here which are scalars. So if I click and drag this, it will scale the object. Again, you can also click once, enter a number. So I can enter 2 and it would scale it 2 times. So if I click on this and hold down Alt while I do it, it should, or actually, sorry, you have to hold down Alt and then click on it. Yeah, it'll copy it. So now I have 2. The other thing with the gumball is this these quarter circles here. They will rotate. The gumball only goes in orthogonal directions in the XYZ axes, so it's a little limited, but it does help you in, there's a lot of situations where it's helpful and just quicker. So yeah, again, click and drag, or you can enter a number, 90. You can also click on the center to move it. So you could snap to something. So like if I had the center of this object and I wanted to move this center to like the end of this thing, I could. This is not really the best example, but like for a circle, right? If you want to move this circle so that the center of it is on something, you could move it so that it snaps to the end. And it will move in, you'll notice as I click on these, they'll go black or kind of get selected. Sometimes if you click on this and only 2 of them are selected, it will not move in all 3 directions. So just be wary that sometimes you have to get it, finagle it to make sure that you click on the center with all 3 of the arrows selected, meaning that you basically have free control of where you move it. Another command on the gumball that shows up only with curves is this circle, this little dot on the arrow. This is an extrude. So it's the same thing as an extrude curve command, a little more limited because it obviously doesn't cap it. It doesn't create a solid object. But this is helpful in certain situations. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a couple commands that I think are helpful and maybe not necessarily as known, and just some things about the commands. So first thing is the difference between offset and extrude. So offset, or let's get a curve here. And if I use my handy gumball, extrude this up. So the difference between offset here is if I have this, I can extrude a surface as well as a command. So if I do my extrude surface command, which for me the alias is ES, whenever you enter a command, Rhino will tell you what to do. Up here, it will tell you what the next thing to do is. There's also always a bunch, or not always. For some commands, there's options here. And if you want to change this, you can just click on it and it will change it. So delete input, I don't want to delete input, so I'm going to click on no. Solid is yes. And then I can click on direction and it's going to ask me for a point of direction, and I'm going to go this way. So you'll see with the extrude command, it just goes in one direction and it doesn't affect the surface equally. This applies to curves as well, but it's going to be more pronounced in surfaces, so I'm showing it with surfaces. So if I do this, right, it's not the same thickness all the way through. On the other hand, if I do offset, which for me is FS, if I flip the direction, so flip all is how you flip the direction, and the arrows will show you which direction it's going in. I can change the distance, so I'll go 10 feet. Solid. Yes, it's not going to preview it, unfortunately, but I'm going to hit space to do it. You'll see that when I offset it, it's an even surface all the way through. Another thing I want to talk about is points and points on. So these here, when you click on something, these are points. And if you click on it, you can move it around with the gumball. There are 2 types of points in Rhino. There's solid points and just regular points. I have solid points on F1 as a keybind and regular points as F2. Solid points on is a command. Solid point on, and then there's point on. Solid point on uses acronyms, and then points on, you have to spell it out. I don't know why. Sometimes Rhino just is weird. But this is a solid. This is not a solid. So if I have F1, that's, you select an object and it'll show the points. So actually, let's put a demonstration with a cube. If I do F1 with this, it'll show the points, and then I can move the points. So if I want to move this, it'll move that section and distort it. On the other hand, F2, you have to select an object for this to work too. So you select this, and F2, the points will show for it and stay on, and then you can move it around. So you'll notice if I actually select all of these and then do F1, right, so F1 is solid points on, all the points get shown for the solids here. but the 3D things, but not anything, no points are shown for the 2D thing. Whereas if I do F2, these will show up, and these are still just there because they're not off, but if I do this again, F2, right, these will show up, but these won't. There's also helpful feature is the hide or isolate commands. So if I have this and I do hide, which for me is HH, it will hide it. In order to show it, you just type in show. There is two show commands. There's show and then show selected. So if I hide all this as well, if I just do show, it's going to show all of the objects all at once, which can be quite annoying and just not helpful in certain situations. So there's also a command called show selected, which for me is SS. I don't have the show command actually keybinded. I just default to show selected. So because with show selected, you can just select everything and it's the same thing as show. But with show selected, you can just show one thing. So these are all the objects I have hidden. And I'm like, you know what? I want to keep some of these hidden. I just want to work with this and this. I can select these and boom, they're unhidden now. There's also isolate. You can isolate an object by, for me, the keybind is HI. Or it should be HI. Is it not HI? Oh, it's II. My bad. Sorry, I haven't used Rhino all summer. So it's II, and then it will isolate it so that you can work with this. You'll notice all these other things disappeared. You can work with this, and then if I want to unisolate, it's literally unisolate. That's the command. For me, it's HR. Long story. Don't worry about it. And then it will, unisolate the object. It'll put it back with all the other things in the main model. So again, helpful for modeling things. Another really helpful command, which you do really need to know actually, is zoom and zoom selected and zoom extents. So if I'm here and I'm working in something, if I type in zoom extents, which for me, the alias is ZE, if I type in ZE, it'll zoom to show everything in the window. I can also select something and type in ZS, which is zoom selected, and it will zoom into the object, whatever you're looking at. So if I'm like, oh, I want to work with this point over here, I can ZS, boom, it gets me closer. Rhino will also do this thing where the zoom scrolling, where scrolling gets bugged. So like right now it's pretty smooth and works, but sometimes Rhino, if you're working in Rhino for a while, Rhino will like suddenly just stop scrolling properly. Like you'll scroll in a little bit and it'll for some reason scroll in super far, or it will get really slow. Like you'll be scrolling forever and ever and it just won't be moving. In order to fix that, just type in ZS or ZE. Any of the zoom commands kind of reset Rhino's zoom function, and then your scrolling will work fine. So again, if your zoom ever is like, if your scroll wheel is ever like weird and you're like, something's bugged, it's not working, why is this not zooming properly? Just type in ZS or ZE, and that'll reset it, and that's the best way to fix it. There's also rotate and rotate 3D. So rotate, for me is RR. This rotates basically in a 2D plane. So for here, I think it's going to be an X, Y, yeah. Rotate 3D does it in the 3D plane. I'm not sure what my keybind for rotate 3D is. Oh, it's RD. Okay. So if I have an object, it's going to say select objects to rotate. I select my object. I'm going to hit space or enter. Start of rotation axis. So for here, it's going to say the rotation axis is basically perpendicular to where you want it to rotate. So I want it to rotate in the YZ. So I'm going to say perpendicular is along the Z axis, right? So now you'll see this circle here. I can click and rotate it like that. And obviously this doesn't have to be in XYZ coordinates. It's easier that way, but you can rotate in any direction as long as you have an axis. So that's rotate 3D versus rotate. There's also move face and move edge, very helpful when working with solids. So this is a solid. You'll see if you select on it, up in the top left, it says one closed poly surface added to selection. That is a solid. If you select on it, so in this case, I click on it, it says one open poly surface, right? This is not a solid. There's obviously an opening here. If you're 3D printing, you need to make sure that everything in your model is closed solid. If it's an open solid, it will mess up the 3D printer and it will not work. So the reason I say this is because if you even just have, like, here, let me show you. If I do this, okay, let me do 0.5 inches. Okay, there we go. This should work. Or actually not work. So, right, you're looking at this, it looks fine, it looks closed. If I select on it, one open poly surface, right? Because there's a little gap here. And this is actually bigger than it can be sometimes, and when you're working with a complex model, it's nearly impossible to, it can be very hard to find these. The command to do this is show edges. So if I do show edges, select surfaces, so I'm going to select this. You can, if you're working with something you want to 3D print, just select everything, then hit space, and then it'll show you, you can change the color, but see this pink? That means that that edge is an edge. It's not actually, it's an open edge, sorry. So it's not actually part of a closed surface. And so then you'll see, oh, this is not right. So then you can zoom in and try and find where it's wrong. And you'll be like, oh, I just need to move this point over. And hopefully that'll fix it. And you'll see here, it'll show all edges. It'll show all the edges, or it'll show naked edges. You want to show naked edges, and that'll help. Anything, if there's a naked edge, your 3D model will not print. So you want to use this before 3D printing, and it will help a lot. Also, if you are using modeling best practices, you should never run into this situation because you should always be snapping. You should always be making sure things are done correctly and accurately, and then you won't run into this problem. This is also relevant for Boolean commands. So Boolean commands are commands with 3D objects, solid objects, sorry. So at least I'm pretty sure, will this work? Let's find out. So Boolean, there's Boolean union, which will join things, Boolean subtraction, or Boolean difference, and like a couple other ones. So we're going to try Boolean difference here. So I'm going to subtract from this with this. Oh, wait. Subtract from with. Yeah, no, it didn't work. Because this is a closed poly surface. This is not a closed poly surface because of this over here. So Boolean commands will not work unless they are both closed poly surfaces. So, having said that, move face and move edge. Move edge and move face aren't related to being closed poly surface, but they help when working with 3D objects. So the move edge, I have it as VE as a keybind. You can select an edge here, and I hit enter. I can pick a point to move from, and then I can move this based on that. And that does, wonky stuff. So you can just move an edge. It's kind of like having solid points on and moving just a point. So again, helpful. There's also move face, so I can move, for me that's VF. I can select, let's say I have this face here. Let's say I want this to be taller, right? I could create like a whole new curve around this and extrude it up and create another extension here, but that would take forever and create more modeling mess than need be. So instead, I can select this face, space for enter, click on a point, move it up, and it's got moved up. Delete seems like a really obvious thing. There's obviously, you can use backspace or delete to delete. I actually have delete set to an alias of Q. So in my tools, or in my aliases menu, let me find it. Q here. So delete is actually a command that you run. When you hit delete or backspace, you're actually running the delete command in Rhino. So I actually have it also sent to Q so that I don't have to move my left hand away to go to the delete button, because the delete and backspace button are obviously on the opposite side of the keyboard. So what I can do is I can select an object, type in Q space, right, which is a pretty easy thing to do, especially if you're a gamer. Q space, and then it deletes it. Also, just a quick thing, you'll notice I have like an apostrophe and a dash before all the commands, and some of them have like an exclamation mark. I don't know exactly why it works like this, but just enter the commands like this and you'll be fine. So yeah, I have delete and Q, saves me a lot of time and it's a lot easier. So I do want to talk about materials again. In Rhino, materials are textures and you can change the scale of them, because Rhino obviously doesn't know that if you're modeling a building that's 100 feet tall or a building that's 10 feet tall. So you're going to have to change the scale of your materials in order to make sure that the render looks accurate. So first of all, applying a material, if you, let's go with like brick or something that'll be easy to see. I'm going to go into Rhino's library here. Sure. So I have a brick material, and in order to do this, you're going to need to use the apply box mapping and mapping widget commands. So if I apply box mapping, and then you don't need to worry about any settings or anything, just basically hit space 5 times. And then mapping widget, this is, you only need to do this twice. You'll see this bounding box come up, this dashed line. That's the control for the material texture. It doesn't affect the model at all. So if I go back to shaded, you'll see that as I change this bounding box or not. Okay, sometimes Rhino's default materials don't actually scale. I'm not totally sure why. But yeah, so instead we're going to go back here. I'm going to create a material from a picture so you can get any texture off of the internet, basically. So I'm going to get a picture. I just have some brick here. And you'll see that now, I actually don't know if I have to, oh, I don't even have to redo it. So as I change this box, right, it changes the texture. So I can scale it. If I scale it proportionally, it does this. You can rotate it, do whatever. And obviously the texture, so if you have a solid form like this, a closed surface, it affects the texture on all of the surfaces equally. So obviously if you have a building, that may not be the best because then the sides might be different and not look what you want them to look. So in order to fix this, just explode this, and then each one of these should have, you're going to have to apply box mapping to each one, but each surface can have its own like texture applied. And so now I can change this individually. So you'll see this one's changing, but the other one's not. So that's how you can fix that. So you can just have them all on the same layer still if you need to do this, and it'll apply the same material to them, but each one can have different orientations or sizes or whatever, or each surface. Yeah, there's also Enscape materials. That's a different video. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's mostly the same thing. You can apply a box mapping to Enscape materials and change their scale as well. A handy thing that I do often and is with glass. Glass is actually pretty straightforward in Rhino. If you go here, you can just go to the glass option, and this is generally fine. Like this works great. And then it's pretty simple, but it gives you a pretty decent amount of customizability. You can change the tint of it by clicking here, you know, lots, infinite color options. And then you can also change how the clarity, like if it's really frosted or not, and you can change how reflective it is. That's pretty much all you really need. So glass is actually pretty simple, and this will work great in any rendering or whatever. I also want to talk about aliases real quick. I'm just going to bring up basically my spreadsheet that I have of all my aliases. These are just, I basically just took common commands that I use all the time and are sort of basic, and I assign them aliases. This is what I recommend. These are chosen based on ease of access. So, you know, trying to keep everything on the left side of the keyboard so that it's all in one area so I don't really have to move my hand that much. The one big thing of note I would say is probably like the move command or anything related to move. I have it as V, not M, which is probably a little weird, but you use move a lot. Like it's probably one of the most common commands you use, if not the most common. And so having it on M, it's a little far away and it's just kind of hard to get to. So I changed it to V because it's right there. You know, if your hand's on the left side of the keyboard in the normal position, it's right under F, so you don't have to move your finger that much at all. This obviously may not be the best setup for you, but I would recommend, if you're unsure about it, I would recommend at least just trying this out first. I've been pretty careful to try and make this the most optimized and best way. I'm sure it's not, but I think it's pretty close. So I would try this out first, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then obviously, you know, do what it works best for you. Like I said, a lot of these commands are self-explanatory, or, you know, Rhino will walk you through them pretty easily. But I would recommend going through and try out all of these. These are, again, the basic ones. So if you try out all of these and kind of get a basic feel for what they're doing, you'll have a pretty good basis to start off of. And there are like probably 1,000 commands in Rhino, and this is obviously only like probably 30 or 40. I don't know. So if there's something that you want to do that these commands aren't doing, or that it's taking you forever to do with these commands, there's probably a better way to do it. If you want to practice, the best way to do so is just to pick something in your house and model it. So get a calculator, get a lamp, whatever, and just try and model it. Any questions, feel free to reach out, and any problem solving or anything like that, let me know. So yeah, I will see you guys soon.